So, Lily Orchard, aka CD Call, did a short review on Knights of Guinevere. Yeah, that's pretty much my reaction. And we're going to be looking at that video today. If you haven't seen Knights of Guinevere, it's a pilot produced by Glitch Studios and written by Terrace, the creator of Owl House. And Lily/CD Call are one of the worst, if not the worst, essay reviewer channels on YouTube. My most viewed videos are of her and the really just baffling leaps in logic she takes, along with her insane hot takes. I'm sure you remember these.
Just recently I was discussing magic systems, a fake storytelling concept invented by fandom over on my Tumblr, and the discussion was routinely being ground to a halt by people who kept repeating, "It works if it's done well, it works if it's done well, it works if it's done well," to the point I just dropped any pretense of professionalism and started asking them if they were diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome.
In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Josh, Not That One, and the other staff had a little petting zoo hidden in their hotel. In fact, I'm going to assert that the reason Josh, Not That One isn't saying anything is because he's been grooming children for years and is just trying to avoid getting caught. Josh, Not That One, is a pedophile who's hiding his secret BronyCon child trafficking ring, which Taylor LaSalle was aiding him with, a ring which every single person mentioned in this video as being unwilling or unable to do the simplest of tasks in regards to addressing child predators is also contributing to. And gentlemen, if you think I'm wrong about that, sue me.
I'm not going to pretend this is equal opportunity villain simping, okay? So before we start with the whole people are fascinated about why someone would turn to darkness, no, they're not. They're only fascinated when it's white guys. Let's just get that out of the way. It's not a disputable fact.
Do I think Rebecca Sugar is a fascist sympathizer? No. Do I blame anybody who comes to the conclusion that she is based on Steven Universe's content? No.
CD, are you really calling the show objectivist? No, I'm just playing around. I do that.
Yeah, so with that, it's probably unsurprising she has started an entire subgroup of people pointing out how she doesn't understand media, her actual crimes, along with her blatant hypocrisy. Normal grifters will usually get something wrong to support some kind of narrative they set up for said base. Lily will just get random things wrong and make really random assertions, and not even ones that seem to back up what she's trying to proclaim. For instance, back to this video, she seems to think that the entire pilot takes place in the theme park itself.
I could also describe the show's aesthetic as like Epic Mickey crossed with Kaima. It hangs on a lot of shots of a rundown, not Disneyland, that has at some point stripped away its own whimsy in the name of cutting costs. Like fast food joints that at some point tried to make themselves look like upscale cafes that just so happen to be cheaper to maintain. The entire park has a grimy, rundown look to it, the friendly, marketable exterior clearly meaning more to the company than the park actually being enjoyable.
Yeah, that's not true. And there are plenty of opportunities to see that. The first time we actually see the parks are on platforms high up in the sky, complete with rides, lights, and castle aesthetics. We later see this again when the park passes over Frankie's boat job and throws garbage on them, which they need to collect. We even see the actual park when Andy is fired from her job, and it looks completely different, very shiny and futuristic compared to the place we just saw. That's actually the place below the park, where everybody else has to work to keep the park running. Again, a lot of opportunities to see that, but for whatever reason, Lily just didn't. Or this assertion that Frankie is the writer's self-insert character.
To the company than the park actually being enjoyable. Frankie seems to be the character Dana put a lot of herself into, a visionary whose ideas are completely ignored or squandered by the corpos at the top of the food chain, and who now has to begrudgingly slum it in the garbage heap with the lower classes. But nonetheless still looks up at that big tower with wide-eyed envy and longing. Clinging to a dead, long-discarded relic of the idea of the park she's kept in her head since childhood, she literally finds her childhood nostalgia in its garbage.
Now you would think Andy would make more sense since she was the one who worked for the Disney insert and left on bad terms, much like Terrace did. Or that the two characters are actually two sides of working for Disney. Or just not her at all, but any artist that's working for a very large company. There are so many better ways of reading this, but Lily just took seemingly the first one that popped into her head, which just also happened to be the simplest. That the character that talks the most about whimsical magic happens to be the insert for the character. Lily then just also writes off Andy since, as she says, she isn't in it much despite being in most of the pilot.
Garbage. Anyway, Frankie's girlfriend, friend, sister, Frankie's roommate, Andy, is actually working Frankie's dream job, and there's a cute little moment where she's trying to fix a horribly scuffed robot, and while she can't get it working, Frankie diagnoses the problem without even being able to see it, showing that she's a prodigious visionary being held back by the system. Ugh, finally, the Fountainhead is going to be in Kingdom Hearts 4. CD, are you really calling the show objectivist? No, I'm just playing around. I do that. Sadly, Andy doesn't have as much to her as Frankie does. The show spends far more time with Frankie, with Andy largely serving in a more supporting role. I'm sure once it's actually picked up and has new episodes, that might change, but at the moment I'm getting flashbacks to when the Owl House very slowly shifted protagonists as if nobody would notice. Andy's main vessel is to show that a sort of pseudo-classism is formed among the park employees, with Andy being a crownie because she works in the tower and has a high-tech bougie job. But as her living situation makes it very clear, the park has a sneering disregard for all of its employees and treats them all like shit. Have you
Again, I'm just pointing out that Andy is in most of the pilot, along with Frankie, and most of the actual pilot also wouldn't be possible without her, since she's the one that knows how to break into the park to fix the freaking android. She also talks Frankie's boss out of ripping out more of Frankie's teeth and letting them go to fix up the robot to begin with. And again, Lily just brushes off these things, kind of like what she did for Lois in Delicious in Dungeon. Also, what was that about the Owl House? Those characters didn't disappear. The show just added 2 more characters who also interacted with the other 2. She just says things like that in a lot of her videos, and they will not add up. Like, this isn't fitting any other narrative than what Lily thinks happened in the shows. It's a little bit backwards to how most grifters will try to treat their audience into thinking their opinions are right above everybody else's. Instead, Lily is focused solely on her own. And the rest is just political rants making contradictory statements and trying to hype herself up as some kind of enlightened centrist, kinda like Bill Maher. Yet, for instance, this clip.
What exactly is Knights of Guinevere? It carries a lot of anti-capitalist language, but it still orients much of its emotional heart around the nostalgic, wide-eyed wonder of a Disney adult who is clearly in for some kind of rude awakening, which makes it clear that this is largely a big vent piece about Disney. You know, like Shrek was. That in isolation is fine. Disney is a big corporation, and it doesn't need to be defended by randos like me. But it rubs me the wrong way, and I will fully confess it is for only one reason. There's an entire ocean of millennials and Zoomers whose anti-capitalism begins and ends with Disney. Their objection to AI and censorship and stagnant art direction starts at Disney, and it never moves beyond Disney. And anytime an animated movie comes out at the same time as a Disney film, well, out come the monkey bots farming outrage. This is very much a parasocial hatred dressed up in socialist rhetoric. This isn't great because while Disney is a hotbed of corporate fuckery, it's also the point of hyperfixation for right-wing nutcases who want to make it the effigy for all their made-up crap about sanitization and wokeness because Disney as a corporation is ever so slightly more liberal than others. And millennial and Gen Z anti-capitalists fall prey to right-wing psyops with all the predictability of a dodo bird approaching a predator. Just this most recent summer, we saw people trying to play this fucking game by comparing an overly bloated evil megacorporation to another overly bloated evil megacorporation. I guess Inhumane Crunch is fine when it's a corporation you're not irrationally obsessed with.
Okay, so there are right-wing grifters that only watch Disney to hate on it no matter if the product's good or not. I have covered a lot of them that do that and a lot of their schemes and tricks. However, just hating on Disney doesn't make you a right-wing grifter. And furthermore, why didn't you actually use any of the bad ones that do it instead of these 3 random people? It seems like she just looked onto YouTube about who was comparing what to Disney and then chose that. Like I said, it doesn't mean everyone that makes these kinds of comparisons are right-wing grifters. It's not hard to tell the difference if you want, because grifters don't just hate things, they have to exaggerate, lie, or get things wrong through being completely lazy. Here's just a recent example is the hate that Silent Hill F got from grifters like Synthetic Man and Andy Pants Gaming for being, quote, anti-marriage.
Not an exaggeration. This is not one of those cases where I just tell you, oh, another modern game sucks. But yes, this game does suck, but that's besides the point. That's just a dime a dozen in this era. No, Silent Hill F genuinely disgusted me. This game is some of the most overt anti-natalism, anti-marriage propaganda that I've seen in years. This is complete embarrassing slop. I don't care if he worked as a social worker once upon a time and witnessed a lot of abusive fathers who beat their wives and their children. This story is encouraging Japanese people not to get married or to have kids, when their country's birth rate is already in the toilet and has begun importing dangerous immigrants just like all the first world countries in the West. No, it's much better to be a career woman and work until you're 40, have no fucking kids, your egg carton's empty, you got 5 cats and are constantly stinking a piss, still chasing the high of that Chad who fucked you one time when you were 20. I mean, come on, do I even need to tell you how ridiculous it is to equate marriage to chopping your arm off, slicing your face off, getting a huge ass brand on your back?
Okay, first, what? Second, the f***?
This is all based on the bad ending of the game, ignoring the good ending of the game where the MC is in a relationship, all because Andy Pants and Synthetic Man, remember the gaming experts and lovers, didn't know this famous franchise had games with multiple endings, which started at freaking 1. I also kind of just gotta laugh at this one point when Synthetic Man complains that the controls are too difficult, but then also admits that he put it on hard mode because he, quote, wanted the challenge.
Silent Hill F's case, this is one of the worst combat systems I have ever experienced in any video game. I'm not exaggerating, I swear to you, this is one of the worst combat systems of all time, and I'm gonna try my best to explain why it was so painful. But first, before I say anything, I need to tell you, I played this game on hard, and this time I actually have a good reason, because I promised myself I wasn't gonna play a game on hard unless it's notoriously easy. The reason I picked hard for this game is because there's actually only 2 difficulty settings at the start. There's story, yes, they call it story, and hard. Now, I don't know about you, but every single modern video game I've ever played, story meant game journalist difficulty. That's what it means. So I have this dilemma where I have to choose between baby easy and hard is often unbalanced and basically untested. And there's several parts of this game that give me the impression they did not test hard difficulty very thoroughly. Now again, before any tourists decide to use this information against me just saying, oh, well, you played on hard, of course it's hard.
Yeah, no shit, honey!
Yeah, that's beta behavior, dude. Here, Synthetic Man is clearly in the wrong because he was too lazy to play the game to get the good ending and didn't know anything about how the franchise games actually worked, basing it all on a sliver of knowledge that he did get, but didn't elaborate on any more than this. It's stupid, it's lazy, and it's wrong. That's what grifting actually looks like, Lily, not just complaining about something that is objectively bad. The videos here aren't that. They just point out how these objectively better films did compared to Disney's. Like, since you brought up twice, K-pop Demon Hunters and Elio. K-pop Demon Hunters had so much better success on every front, whereas Elio was even dragged by its own creators for all the changes Disney made to it. Changes you would think someone like Lily would be angry about, like removing the gay crush the MC had. Which also takes me to this contradictory part of the video, where she tries to say that the whole idea that studios are to blame for everything, and all the changes that are made, or is just a myth, and that the writers retain as much responsibility, if not more so.
Nonetheless, while the pilot is completely barren in terms of LGBT characters, a lot of people seem to go in expecting otherwise, as if it was just a foregone conclusion. And from where I sit, the problem comes down to the fact that it's a glitch series. People have gotten it into their heads over the years that the only thing keeping their favorite LGBT cartoons from being even more LGBT is the studios. Anytime the execution of that LGBT rep was criticized, the inevitable cognitive dissonance of the fandom would take hold. Anything positive is the creator, anything negative is the fault of the studio, a belief that is held despite it being proven completely false time and time again. Studios give a flat yes or no. They wouldn't say yes to a gay secondary character, but no to a gay main character. That's not how they work. And they aren't that controlling or nuanced. Studios are afraid of getting ass blasted from rednecks who hate seeing any LGBT character, no matter their role. And how willing they are to engage in it lives and dies on how much the government officials who are supposed to approve their mergers are currently bleating about DEI. I've been pointing this out for years. If they said yes at all, the only remaining bottleneck is the creator, and creators make characters who interest them first and foremost. If Luz and Frankie are any indication, Dana prefers making Futch or Butch girls the protagonists of her work. I wonder why that could possibly be. But because so much of animation discourse is about redirecting any criticism of work, even minor criticism, away from the creator and onto a corporation, people weren't prepared for Terrace to make the exact same kind of show she'd made before, and with the exact same kind of character she'd made before, and the exact same kind of themes she'd made before. I'm not someone who pulls her punches on harsh criticism, but that criticism has to have merit to it, and there's a fundamental difference between sidelining minority characters in favor of the default, and simply not having them in the first place. It's pretty clear at this point what kind of show Dana wants to make. Fantasy horror about gender non-conforming women with a splash of anti-capitalism, nonetheless completely immersed in childhood nostalgia in a way that vaguely resembles waterboarding. Both her big shows are about that, with Cog's only real hook being that it also functions as the animation equivalent of retweeting a 10-year-old call-out post like it was just posted that day.
Okay, there's a lot of misconceptions there. Namely, a lot of shows have changes made to them by studios, and a lot of them aren't political or anything, they're just what execs want. Like, He-Man 2002 was going to be a continuation before the execs got involved and made it a reboot because they thought kids wouldn't get it and adults don't buy toys. So, again, became a reboot. Even Japanese animes like Inuyasha had changes, like aging up the character of Shishomaru because he needed to be a cool villain like Seto Kaiba from Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows don't just have decisions made before production either, there's a lot that goes into after the production, which is why a lot of popular shows like Inside Job and Samurai Jack were cancelled despite their popularity, while other shows like Justice League Unlimited and Steven Universe somehow got more seasons despite the writers not asking for those. Those kinds of decisions were made with very little input from the creators, if any, all made at different times for different reasons. Productions of the shows have a lot of variables and moving parts in that need to be looked at and dissected for every singular product. Lily, however, doesn't believe this, or more likely, doesn't believe it happens to people when she doesn't like said person. For instance, Lily has consistently said the creator of Steven Universe, Rebecca Sugar, was using studio interference as an excuse for bad writing. Or bad for Lily. Lily didn't like that they tied the first gay wedding in animation to a plot-important invasion episode that took away from the wedding, making it a virtue signal in Lily's eyes. While Rebecca had claimed they needed to do that specifically to make sure they didn't cut the episode entirely. They even put Ruby in the dress for the same reason, as the studio had already edited Ruby into being a man in different countries that hated or had laws against gays. She didn't want them to do that. There was already evidence that they had done that, so it seems like the evidence is in Rebecca Sugar's favor here. But again, Lily just kind of ignores all those things and just says, no. She has a similar reaction to the Owl House for the restrictions the studio made, but still blame the writer Dana Terrace. In fact, Lily even takes time here as well, on top of what we've already seen, to take shots at what she didn't like in the Owl House. And again, she tries to half and half it a little bit, trying to defend the creator at first, but then also slamming her for not being quote-unquote good enough for the LGBTQ or trans community. She talks about the drama with Dana Terrace started by saying Frankie wasn't trans, which people on Twitter didn't take well. And that drama did in fact happen, and it was kind of stupid. However, she also takes time to talk about how Dana doesn't really care about trans people at all, and didn't really help them in the Owl House by making secondary trans characters like Masha and Rain Whispers, both of whom were non-binary, by the way, not trans. And here's that rant.
I myself received an anon on Tumblr, which I suspect was attempting to rope me into saying something that they could clip for drama purposes, trying to weasel around the issue by softly accusing Terrace of shutting down people's headcanons after having trans characters in the Owl House. Now, first of all, I've always hated this deeply entitled aspect of fandom, wherein people act like they're being censored or bullied when someone disagrees with them in public.
You serious?
Critical discourse getting shouted down with "let people enjoy things" or "the death of media literacy," heated enthusiastic discussions out of work being branded as fighting or discourse, and any statement from a creator that closes off a headcanon being branded as shutting down headcanons. It's all a very deeply entitled, greedy, childish performance from people who simply don't like being disagreed with, and now they've gone from harassing critical voices in fandom to harassing creators. Terrace did not shut down anyone's headcanon. She was asked if Frankie was trans and said no. Regarding the fact that she's made trans characters before, who were those trans characters? Rain Whispers and Masha, two characters who could at best be described as secondary. Luce, Amity, Ida, that guy from the Digimon reboot, and King are decidedly not trans. Terrace has had, up to this point, never made a trans character in a leading role. In fact, let's not beat around the bush. None of the cartoons that are praised for being genderlicious and trans-inclusive have had a trans lead character. I would have been quite surprised if Terrace decided to make any of the three leading characters trans, because we can't even get the actual trans people to nut up and do that. The idea that Terrace would decide to make a trans lead character when she, as a cis person, knows nothing about a trans experience, and therefore is largely incapable of resonating with it is strange. How do you expect her to be inspired to make something she knows nothing about? People typically write from their own experiences, or based on what inspires them. Though they can value diversity, without that spark of inspiration, they can't dig right into the weeds of those stories in a way a main character requires. Also, it's pretty fucking gross to look at the decidedly butch character and go, oh, she must be trans femme. Like, yes, I know trans women can be butch, but how many butch trans women have you actually met? Strangely enough, Knights of Guinevere is completely devoid of LGBT influence at all. The two lead characters who live together and have been together all their lives got decidedly gal-palled by word of God, though I'm convinced that that's because Frankie is going to fuck the robot. No matter what else happens, remember where you heard this first. Frankie is going to fuck that robot.
Okay, so hearing Lily's rendition about these characters, they sound unimportant, right? But Rain in particular was the love interest of the MC's master, leader of the rebels against the Empire, had multiple plans to try to topple said empire, and the one that got possessed by the main villain at the end, and then helps to end him by stomping him to death, literally. I really don't think that Lily understands what secondary characters are and thinks they're just the same as background characters. Secondary characters can in fact be crucial to the plot, especially given what she's already said about the Owl House switching MCs. And no, you don't have to be specifically the same type or race of person to write about their stories. Last time I checked, Terrace wasn't a 14-year-old Latina or a zombie boy, but nobody complained about Loser Hunter. Also, people that write the same type of people as them aren't guaranteed to be good either. For example, let's take a look at how Lily, a trans woman, has written some trans characters in her stories, most of which are either going to be rapists, like in her MLP fanfic Stockholm, something she tried to pretend she didn't write but forgot she was on tape saying she did, the fanfic where she was in a polyamorous relationship with a Pokemon, yeah, even having a clone baby with him, or like, here's my favorite one, Scars, where a trans team is bumping uglies with their adopted sibling in suburbia which the parents are approving of, which kinda comes off as grooming if you think about it, because they adopted this one kid, raised them for years, and are now just kind of okay with them dating their sibling, who is their biological daughter. Kind of weird when you think about it, right? And here's the even funnier thing. That one, Scars, came out right after she got angry and attacked the pairing of Adora and Catra in the new 2018 She-Ra for being adopted siblings and quote-unquote incest, something she went ranting for a good chunk of time. And that right there is hypocrisy, Lily. You did the same thing you attacked others for, but also somehow did it worse than them on top of that. At least them can say they were trained as child soldiers and not in a nuclear family household. You literally made it a nuclear family household. Like, I really don't get why she thinks these are good ideas. Lily is constantly taking potshots like that throughout her videos while having these in her closet. And that's not a new thing either, as she's often talking up her own writing material in comparison to others that she deems as terrible.
I'm not criticizing Becky here, it's just more of a neutral statement of fact. And as I came to that conclusion, I actually found a lot of value in Steven Universe, but maybe not in the way the creator intended. Let's see, how do I put this? So I'm a writer myself, both personally as I work on my own hobbies, and professionally through this channel and ghostwriting on the side. I've been writing stories since I was 14, and the main piece of original fiction I've been working on the last few years is called Scars, a story set in the 90s about two people who have been as close as they can possibly be since they were kids, contrasting their very different lived experiences.
You need readers that are going to ask you the questions that get you thinking more deeply. You need readers who are willing to invest their attention as much as you are willing to invest your time. If I can take this brutal sadist and write her as a loving matriarch that rivals Fluttershy when it comes to sincere kindness, I'm pretty sure you can make an alicorn. You can make a good story out of anything. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more Mommy Adagio to write.
Reforming Adagio would be to make Adagio nice. And nice Adagio isn't fun. Adagio was fun specifically because she was a predator. And you can't combine nice and predator. Well, okay, you can, but doing so would require the writers to contend with the fact that they spent the last 4 years encouraging children to talk to strangers, and we all know they're not going to do that.
One issue with the pilot that was underspoken about was the way the radio demon uses veves from Haitian voodoo. Voodoo is an extremely demonized religion, and in pop culture is often used as a free idea bucket when writers want to find something to tie a villain to. In the actual release, Alistair doesn't have immediately recognizable veves swirling around him, but after consulting with an actual practitioner of voodoo, they said they were still the same symbols, just cut up and altered so that they look different and won't invite a spirit with a genie sense of humor into your house, which isn't actually all that different at all. But after consulting with an actual practitioner of voodoo, they said they were still the same symbols, just cut up and altered so that they look different and won't invite a spirit with a genie sense of humor into your house. Just cut up and altered so that they look different and won't invite a spirit with a genie sense of humor into your house, which isn't actually all that different.
Yeah, she is constantly bringing others down while talking herself up as this bastion of moral clarity, all while making really basic mistakes, thinking the whole pilot takes place in a park, calling non-binary characters trans, or saying a writer is appropriating voodoo even though that guy you asked to verify this said that they weren't voodoo symbols, just kinda looked like them. It's a very common grifter tactic to bring down certain people or groups by appealing to ingrained biases, making themselves look like a more pure version, or latching onto dumb internet drama to look smart by comparison. Both things Lily does in this video, all hoping that their audience doesn't know enough about said material to spot their own lack of knowledge of the source material. Labels like conservative, liberal, progressive don't matter. Anybody can call themselves anything. But the important thing is the facts will never change. And you can use that to tell when somebody is trying to grift you or not. Unfortunately, Lily doesn't do well with facts or details. She does well with baseless generalities and made-up nonsense, which leads to her getting called out, and instead of taking the criticism in stride, she crashes out, cursing out everybody and never letting any of this shit go, including all of her bad takes, just doubling down in all of her videos over and over again, like a crazy person that follows their ex on Twitter just to constantly shitpost under every post that they make. I doubt Lily will ever get her act together, but hey, it's free content for the rest of us. Anyone that has a general understanding of the subject Lily covers could easily point out her mistakes or hypocrisies. Go ahead and take your best shot at it, it's pretty easy. And as you can see, it did pretty well for me. Until next time, this is where I think I'll end the video. What do you think about this utter train wreck that Lily has made? Was there something I missed or that you wished I talked about more? Leave it down in the comments below.